Welcome to Fluxbill. Somewhere in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, in one of the most remote and desolate stretches of desert on Earth, something is being built. Or at least, something is being attempted. A city. Not a normal city that grows organically over decades the way cities always have. Not a city that starts small and expands outward as people arrive and settle and build. A city that is being designed all at once, from scratch. From the imagination of one man and the treasury of one of the richest governments on Earth, and dropped into the desert fully formed, like something from a science fiction novel. They are calling it NEOM. And the numbers attached to it are so large they stop making sense almost immediately. $500 billion. That is the announced budget. $500 billion. To put that in context, the entire Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe after World War II cost roughly $160 billion in today's money. The Apollo program that put humans on the moon cost approximately $280 billion in today's money. NEOM's announced budget dwarfs, both of them combined. And what is being built with that money is not a conventional city. It is a collection of projects so architecturally and technologically ambitious that when the renderings were first released, much of the world assumed they were jokes. Computer-generated fantasies, marketing material for something that would never actually be built. But the bulldozers are real. The construction contracts are real. The workers displaced from their homes in the desert to make way for it were real. And the question hanging over all of it is the one that nobody connected to the project will answer directly. Will any of this actually get built? And if it does, will it become what they say it will become? Or will $500 billion disappear into the sand and leave behind the most expensive abandoned construction project in human history? Today, we are going deep into NEOM. What it is, what it was supposed to be, what is actually being built, and why some of the world's most respected urban planners, economists, and engineers believe the whole thing may be heading toward a spectacular and very public failure. Let's start with the man behind it, Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. The man known universally by his initials MBS. He came to power consolidating control of the Saudi state with a speed and thoroughness that surprised even veteran observers of the kingdom. He positioned himself as a modernizer, a reformer, a young visionary determined to drag Saudi Arabia from its dependence on oil wealth into a diversified 21st century economy. And NEOM is the centerpiece of that vision. It is the physical manifestation of Vision 2030, the economic transformation plan MBS announced in 2016. The idea was simple, even if the execution was anything but. Saudi Arabia knows its oil wealth will not last forever. The world is moving toward clean energy. The kingdom needs a new economic identity. And NEOM was supposed to be the proof of concept, the demonstration project, the thing that would show the world that Saudi Arabia could be a hub of technology, innovation, tourism, and advanced industry. The original NEOM concept was already ambitious. A futuristic city covering 26,000 square kilometers on the Red Sea coast, drawing on land from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt, a place of renewable energy, robot-staffed infrastructure, flying taxis, and artificial rain. A tourist destination, a technology hub, a financial center, all in one. And then in 2022, the announcement came that made the entire world stop and stare. The line. If you have not seen the renderings of the line, you need to pause this video and look them up right now. Because they represent either the most audacious urban design concept in human history, or the most elaborate architectural fantasy ever presented to the public as a serious infrastructure project, possibly both simultaneously. The line is a linear city, a single continuous building 170 kilometers long. That is 106 miles, a straight line cutting through the desert, through the mountains, and down to the Red Sea coast. And it is not a collection of buildings arranged in a line. It is one building. Two parallel mirrored glass facades, each 170 kilometers long and 500 meters tall, the height of the Empire State Building, stretching for the distance between New York City and Philadelphia. Inside this single structure, which is approximately 200 meters wide. 5 million people are supposed to live. 5 million people in what is essentially the world's longest skyscraper, stacked vertically in layers. Residential layers, commercial layers, green spaces and parks built inside the structure. A high-speed rail system running the full length that supposedly allows travel from one end to the other in 20 minutes. 20 minutes for 106 miles. That is a train traveling at over 300 miles per hour through the interior of a building. There would be no cars, no roads, no streets in the traditional sense. Everything would be within a 5-minute walk because the building is only 200 meters wide. All energy would be renewable. The facades would be mirrored to reflect the desert landscape. The entire city would be climate controlled. The architects and urban planners who reviewed the designs publicly described it using words that ranged from visionary to delusional, depending on how politely they were trying to be. The engineering challenges alone are staggering. Building a structure 500 meters tall is hard enough. Building one that is 170 kilometers long and maintaining structural integrity across that distance, across different geological zones, through mountain terrain, in a seismically active region, represents engineering challenges that have no precedent in human history. The shadow problem alone has been widely discussed. A building 500 meters tall and 170 kilometers long casts an enormous shadow, depending on the orientation and the season. The interior of the structure and the landscape on one side would be in permanent or near-permanent shade. The green spaces inside the structure that the renderings show filled with sunshine would require artificial lighting systems of a scale never attempted before. The renderings show sunlight streaming into interior spaces in ways that the basic geometry of the structure makes physically impossible. Then there is the question of who would actually live there. The plan calls for 5 million residents. Saudi Arabia's entire current population is around 35 million people, convincing 5 million people to move into a single building in the desert, far from existing cities, far from international airports initially, in a country that has historically been deeply socially conservative, requires a level of voluntary human migration that has no modern parallel. Economists who have studied the project note that cities do not work the way NEOM's designers seem to assume they work. Cities grow because economic activity concentrates in them and draws people. People come for jobs, for opportunity, for proximity to other people and institutions. You cannot build a city first and expect the economic activity to arrive simply because the building is impressive. History is full of planned cities that were built with enormous investment and ambition and failed to attract meaningful populations. Naypyidaw in Myanmar, Ordos in China, Lavasa in India. Each one a cautionary tale about the assumption that if you build it, they will come. Now let's talk about what has actually happened on the ground. Because the gap between the announced vision and the physical reality has been growing wider with every passing year. Construction began. That is real. Massive earth-moving operations have been underway in the Tabuk region of northwest Saudi Arabia. Thousands of workers have been on site. The infrastructure for construction, roads, worker camps, logistics networks, has been built out at significant scale. The project has spent real money, enormous amounts of it. But in 2024, reports began emerging from sources inside the project that told a very different story from the official announcements. Bloomberg reported that internal NEOM documents showed the planned completion of the line had been dramatically scaled back. The original plan called for 170 kilometers of completed structure by 2030. The revised internal target was reportedly just 2.4 kilometers, not 170. 2.4. Less than 1.5 miles of the planned 106 miles completed by the original target date. The workforce on the project was reportedly being reduced. Contractors who had been awarded work were seeing their scopes cut back. Senior figures associated with the project were departing. The unbounded optimism of the initial announcements was quietly being replaced by the language of phasing and prioritization and long-term development timelines. The language that large failed projects use when they are trying to explain why what was promised is not appearing. And then there is the human cost that existed even before the construction challenges became apparent. The land where NEOM is being built was not empty. It was home to the Huaytat tribe, an indigenous Arabian community who had lived in that region for generations. When the Saudi government decided that NEOM would be built on their land, members of the tribe were told to leave. Most complied, but some refused. Abdul Rahim al-Huwaiti was a member of the Huaytat tribe who spoke publicly about his family's forced displacement. He filmed videos criticizing the project and the forced removal of his community. In April 2020, he was shot and killed by Saudi security forces during what the government described as a security operation. Several other members of his family were arrested. The case drew international attention and condemnation from human rights organizations. The project that was supposed to represent Saudi Arabia's gleaming modern future had begun with the violent displacement of people who had no choice in the matter. This is the tension at the heart of NEOM that no amount of architectural renderings can resolve. A project announced as a vision of a better future, a city of innovation and sustainability and human flourishing, being built on land cleared by force, funded by oil wealth that the project is supposed to help Saudi Arabia move beyond, designed for 5 million future residents while the people who actually live there were removed at gunpoint. The other major components of NEOM beyond the line have faced their own questions. Trojena is the mountain resort component, a ski destination in the mountains of northwest Saudi Arabia that was awarded the hosting rights for the 2029 Asian Winter Games. The announcement raised eyebrows immediately. The mountains in question do not receive enough natural snowfall for competitive skiing. The plan relies on artificial snow production at a scale and cost that independent analysts described as economically and logistically challenging at best. The 2029 Asian Winter Games deadline is approaching, with Trojena still largely unbuilt. Sindalah is the Red Sea Island luxury yacht destination component of NEOM. It has received the most actual construction progress of any NEOM component. Photographs and drone footage show genuine development occurring on the island. It is the most conventionally feasible element of the project, a luxury island resort, which is at least a proven concept even if extremely expensive. The cognitive dissonance at the center of NEOM is this: Saudi Arabia has genuine financial resources. The Crown Prince has genuine political authority to direct those resources. The location has genuine attributes: Red Sea coastline, dramatic mountain landscapes, proximity to the Gulf of Aqaba shipping routes. There is a real argument that some version of a development project in this region could succeed. But the specific vision that was announced, the line in particular, strains the boundaries of physical reality, not because ambition is wrong, but because some of what has been promised appears to violate basic principles of engineering, economics, urban development, and human behavior simultaneously. The most likely outcome that analysts and observers point to is not a complete abandonment of NEOM, but a fundamental reimagining of what gets built. The line as described almost certainly will not be built as described. Some portion of it may be built. A demonstration section, a starting node, something that can be pointed to as real and physical, while the rest of the vision is quietly renegotiated with reality. Whether that constitutes success or failure depends entirely on how you measure it. If you measure against the announcements made to the world, it is failure. If you measure against what typically happens to projects of this scale and ambition in this region, it may be the expected outcome. $500 billion, 170 kilometers of mirrored glass, 5 million people who have not arrived yet for a city that has not been built yet, a tribe that was already there and is now gone, a crown prince whose political legacy is tied to whether any of this becomes real. NEOM is not just a construction project. It is a bet. A bet that one man's vision can override geography, economics, physics, and human nature simultaneously. That money and power and political will are sufficient to conjure a city from a desert. History has an answer to that bet. It has delivered that answer many times before, in abandoned planned cities on every continent. in over-promised megaprojects that consumed fortunes and produced fractions of what was announced. Whether NEOM will be different. Whether this time the vision is large enough and the resources sufficient enough to actually pull off something that has never been done before. That is the question the desert is not yet ready to answer. But the sand is moving. The machines are running. And somewhere in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, the most expensive gamble in the history of human architecture is either being built or being buried. We will find out which one together.